KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world. If we care enough. If we care enough. If we care enough. If we care enough. If we care enough.
I was rolling in my car when I pulled up at the mall. Couldn't find a place to park. Threw my keys to the valet. Handle it for me. I was only there to hang, wasn't looking for a thing. I was just about to bounce, and then I saw Miss Lady. Then I said to myself, my destiny only is one for me. There go my baby. Look at her.
One doesn't really need an excuse. We don't need an excuse to play Uncle Charlie around here. This is Talk Radio. We'll get back to the talk in just a second. Why am I playing Charlie Wilson? I'm glad you asked. Because today, Uncle Charlie gets his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Congratulations to Charlie Wilson. It's about time. I know what it feels like. I got one of those about 10 years ago, I guess, when I got my star on the Walk of Fame. One of the greatest days of my life. The only time. I've been in L.A. for 30 plus years. L.A.'s home. I've lived here longer than anywhere in the world, anywhere else I've lived in the world. And it's the only time that my entire family made it out to L.A. I've got 9 brothers and sisters, and my mom and my dad, and my family all came out for the celebration of my star. It was an amazing day, beautiful day, hundreds and hundreds of fans out when I got my star. So I know what that feels like, and I can only imagine how this is going to hit Charlie today. It's an amazing, amazing day for Charlie Wilson, well-deserved. But I sometimes I think when I hear people getting a star, like, man, they ain't got a star yet. Charlie should have had one a long time ago. So congratulations to Charlie Wilson. Uncle Charlie got his star today on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and I'm happy about that. We got to get Charlie in studio. Charlie hadn't been here. I haven't talked to Charlie in a minute. So I got to call Charlie, get him to come in and talk about his, do a career conversation with Charlie Wilson and talk about his music and his star. But I'm just thrilled. I was excited when I heard the news that Charlie was getting his star today. So we're going to play a little Charlie Wilson between now and the rest of the show, where we can squeeze it in. Celebrating our brother. Congratulations once again to Charlie Wilson, his star, unveiled today on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In this hour, hour 2, 2 great conversations on the backside of this hour. A conversation about the ways in which these massive media layoffs are disproportionately affecting journalists of color. And it's not just the LA Times, although it pains me to see what's going on there. You know the old adage, last hired, first fired. We'll talk about it with Hannah Tamiz, writer and editor, currently working for the Neiman Journalism Lab at Harvard University, that on the B side of this hour. But I am honored, I do mean honored, to start this hour with the former governor of Ohio, Dick Celeste, also a former ambassador to India, former Peace Corps director, has a wealth of knowledge over a long career in public service. But here's why I really wanted to have him on. While governor of the Buckeye State, he commuted 8 death row inmates, 8, and says that in retrospect, not abolishing the death penalty is his biggest regret. We're going to talk about what happened to Kenneth Smith in Alabama in our third hour today, the first person ever to be killed by nitrogen gas. They gassed this brother to death in Alabama. So there's a whole new wave now of product, a whole new process for putting people to death in this country that involves pain and torture, the experts say. So we're not getting better on this issue. In some ways, we're getting worse, even as many people talk about the abolishment of the death penalty. But Governor Celeste is rare in that he commuted 8 death row inmates while he was governor of the Buckeye State. I am honored to welcome Governor Dick Celeste to this program. Governor, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you, Tavis. It's good to be with you.
It's good to have you on, man. It's good to hear your voice. I thank you for the time. We only got about 30 minutes here or less, but I wanted to make the most of it. I want to talk before I let you go. Talk about your book is out. It's called "In the Heart of It All: An Unvarnished Account of My Life in Public Service." I mentioned a moment ago you've done so much in public service, but I really want to hone in for the few minutes here, if I can, on your commuting these 8 death row inmates. Broadly speaking, why did you do that? That's not always popular these days, but you did it. Why?
Well, you're right. The way my kids say, I didn't know how to hold a job because I've done so many different things. In my second term, the process began a step ahead of the death row review. I was approached by some women because they had done a study at the women's prison in Ohio, and they had concluded that the vast majority of women who had sentenced to prison time for whatever reason had struggled with abuse when they were very young. Mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, those kinds of pressures. And they asked me to consider looking at the sentences of a number of women who had killed their abuser. I went through that process. In the end, I reviewed 106 cases, and I made a decision to commute the sentences for 29 women who had killed the person who was abusing them to 3 years in prison plus 250 hours of public service. And when I did that, I mean, that was a major sort of shock to the system. We did not have in Ohio the ability to use the battered woman syndrome as a defense in court. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to consider these cases. As a result of going through that process, the state public defender came to me and asked me to review death row sentences. And he asked me to do a blanket commutation. And I told him in the cases where I commuted the sentences for these women, I'd reviewed each case in depth. I wasn't in a position to review each of the cases on death row in depth, but that if he would let me know who were the individuals who were first in line for execution, I would review their cases.
Hold that thought, Governor. So you agreed to review the cases of those who were first in line. I've commuted 8 death row inmates. He'll tell us how and why he did it when we come forward. You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Our guest is Governor Dick Celeste, former governor of the Buckeye State of Ohio.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton. And I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
City of Los Angeles landlords that own rent-controlled properties, starting February 1st, you'll be able to increase rents by 4% for your rent-controlled properties. An extra 1% per utility, up to 6%, can be added only if you pay the entire gas and electric bill. And don't forget to give your tenant an advance 30-day written notice for rent increases of less than 10%. It is state law. Learn more about the rent increase at housing.lacity.org. That's housing.lacity.org.
We all agree that America has a very serious problem.
Okay, KBLA delegation, we need your help as we launch our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. We would deeply appreciate you going to our KBLA 1580 website and filling out a short climate justice survey, which will help us better serve our beloved community as we build out this campaign. It'll take you just a few short minutes to complete the online survey, and the information you provide us will be invaluable as we do our part to hold folk accountable and amplify the voices of our people in this climate conversation. When you take the survey, you'll be automatically entered to win seats at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. So, hit our website at KBLA 1580. Help us out by taking the short climate justice campaign survey, and you could be our guest at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. Thank you in advance for your consideration and cooperation. At KBLA Talk 1580, we care about the community, we care about the climate.
Watch out! You got me!
The galaxy is safe once again.
In the pretend universe, kids play with pretend guns. In the real world, it's up to us to make sure they don't get their hands on a real gun. If you have a gun in the house, keep it locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Made fresh daily in the Mert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and former Ohio Governor Dick Gillespie was just telling us the story of how he was asked to review those who were first up on death row in Ohio. Governor, pick up the story, please.
Well, we had 106 men on death row and 4 women on death row at that time, Tavis. And I did not have the capability in the time that I had toward the end of my term to review all of their files. And so what I decided to do was to commute the sentences of the women to life without parole, although in one case where it was clear she'd been abused, she was eligible for parole. In the case of the men, it was commuted the sentence of the 4 men who were top of the list to life without parole. But I said at the time, I mean, I was deeply troubled by the death penalty. I voted against it as a state legislator. It is profoundly biased. It's biased in terms of education. If you look at the education level of people on death row, you'll find that most of them haven't finished high school. Serious problems with addiction and mental health, and incredible differences in terms of the ability to have a proper defense attorney. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the racial bias on death row was pronounced in Ohio. Over 30% of the men on death row were African American in a state where the general population was about 12% African American. So, in the end, I felt my responsibility was to exercise mercy on behalf of the people, and I wish that I'd done it for everyone on death row, frankly.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier, you said that one of your great regrets was not being able to abolish the death penalty. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, I actually had the authority to commute the sentences of everyone who was on death row. And I did not have the authority to abolish the death penalty because that was legally enacted into the Ohio statute.
Mm-hmm.
That's under debate today in actively in Ohio, and I think that the current governor of Ohio would support legislation that would replace the death penalty with life without parole. And I think that more and more of our citizens believe that that's the right thing to do. So my hope is that that's the direction we'll move, not in the direction of the kind of horrific execution that happened just recently in Alabama.
Yeah. Tell me, I'm curious always as to the backstory, because I understand that sometimes politicians do things that are expedient for a variety of reasons. But this seems to be for you a heartfelt. It was, in fact, a heartfelt decision on your part to do exactly what you did for those women and for those death row inmates. You laid out moments ago very beautifully and quite succinctly the truth about the way we apply the death penalty in this country. But I'm just curious if I can get inside your head and inside your heart. Like, how did you come to that? As an elected official, you know full well that people love this notion of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. There are some states, of course, that lead. Florida and Texas come to mind immediately. I was just reading some data last night, prepping for my third hour. I believe it's Florida and Texas who last year did almost all of the executions in this country. The overwhelming number, I'll give you more data in hour 3, but the overwhelming number of executions last year took place in Florida and Texas. So not every governor, not every state sees it that way, but I'm curious as to how that the notion of mercy, to use your word, how did that come to resonate with you?
Well, Tavis, I mean, it started out with my upbringing and I grew up very active in the Methodist Church. It's got a strong social justice element to it, and I think I was influenced by that from an early age. Mm-hmm. Throughout my public career, people knew that I opposed the death penalty. That was not a secret. I had spoken out against it in testimony in city of Cleveland. I'd spoken out against it on the floor of the state legislature when I had a chance to vote on it. And as governor, I had the responsibility as governor to consider exercising the commutation authority, which is part of our Constitution. And so that's what I did, and I spoke about it publicly. Politics, it's not so much a party issue. I mean, I after I did this, a fellow Democrat who was the Attorney General challenged what I had done. The courts upheld it because I did have that authority. But, I think more and more people of conscience have to speak up. I think more and more public officials, especially those who pay close attention to the deep injustices represented on death row, mm-hmm. That we would see more and more states moving away from it. I think the direction of most states has been to eliminate the death penalty rather than to carry on in the way that some of the states you've mentioned here.
Yeah, I was about to ask what you recall about the response to your decision to commute those death row inmates sentences, and you've already kind of spoke to that you were challenged about that.
Well, that's a good question, because one of the concerns I had about doing a blanket commutation at the time was that it would incite a backlash that would only reinforce the exercise of the death penalty. Mm-hmm. And just another example of how unjust it is. There are 88 counties in Ohio. 20% of the inmates on death row came from one county, Hamilton County, the home of Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. So it's a totally arbitrary thing, and if you lack education, if you happen to be black or brown, if you're poor, if you have a mental health issue, the chances of ending up on death row are much, much, much higher, and that's wrong.
Yeah. We're going to discuss this in greater detail in our third and final hour, as I mentioned earlier. I want to cover a few other things that before I lose you at the bottom of this hour. We'll get to this more expressly with the case of Kenneth Smith in Alabama. It's a very disturbing case.
Sure.
We'll talk to our guest about that, Joy James, philosopher, in hour 3. But let me just ask you right quick on that Kenneth Smith case in Alabama, what you make of the fact that we are now using nitrogen gas to kill people?
Well, nobody wants to say that what we're doing is suffocating the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what the nitrogen gas does. And you talk about a cruel and unusual punishment. To me, that is exemplary of one of the reasons why I strongly oppose the death penalty.
Yeah, it's disturbing for a lot of reasons. Again, we'll unpack that more with our guest in our final hour today. I mentioned earlier your book, In the Heart of It All, an unvarnished account of my life in public service. I started this hour 24 minutes ago by sharing with the audience that you're not just a former governor of the Buckeye State in Ohio, but you're also a former ambassador to India, former Peace Corps director, and I stopped. You served in the legislature there, as you mentioned earlier. You've done a whole lot in your career, and I want to just ask, in these moments that I have left with you, whether or not you believe that public service is still a noble profession. And I ask that against the backdrop of all that we see today. I don't need to color this much more for you. You're watching the same stuff I'm watching. The way folk behave, how gerrymandering means that when people get in, you can't get them out, how divided Washington is, say nothing of state legislatures, killing folk with nitrogen gas, et cetera, et cetera. I wonder whether or not you believe that public service, since that's in the title of your text, you believe in it, obviously, is it still a noble profession in this country?
Well, it absolutely is. And I think my hope is that younger people coming into public service can restore a sense of values and integrity to the system. I mean, one of the things that I love about young people today is they don't care so much about party or politician, but they care about the issues, and they're determined to make their voices heard one way or another. And so I want to encourage people. There are many temptations in public life, and I talk about them in my book. We have to be guided by our own value system. And you worked for somebody when you were working for Tom Bradley who had a deep value system. And it makes a difference. And I think 2024, we're going to see this play out. I watched it last year in Ohio when politicians tried to change the way we would amend the Constitution in Ohio and require 60% approval rather than 50% plus one. And the people just overwhelmingly, on an August day, I mean, the politicians scheduled the election in August. On an August day, turned out not 8% like the year before, or 12% like usually, but 38% to protect their rights. And I think this next year, this year in November, they're going to take on the issue of gerrymandering and take it out of the hands of politicians, put it in the hands of citizens, so that we get some honesty and integrity back.
Yeah. Every presidential election, it seems we are focused on a number of states. Iowa is one of them, of course, when it starts this process out. Then we go to New Hampshire, and now Democrats, of course, are starting in South Carolina. But when we get to the actual election in November, there are a number of states that we're all watching. And one of those states always seems to be Ohio. And as you know, Ohio is a state, but it's really divided up in 2 or 3 different ways and parts. And so you got to check this part, you got to check this part, you got to check that part. And you see all the persons who are doing election night polling on the different networks trying to explain how Ohio actually works. It is an interesting state, as you know, having been the governor of it. What's your sense of how in play Ohio is going to be in this election?
I think it's going to be more in play than it has been for the last two presidential elections.
Wow.
I think it's going to be seriously contested.
Mm. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it is the very fact that these issues that have been fought over the last year, first the amendment of the Constitution on voting, and then a reproductive rights issue, have brought more and more people into the political process. And these are folks who want to see change. I think that it's going to be challenged because they're going to be looking at two familiar faces, and they're going to have to make a decision between those two familiar faces at the presidential level. But I do think that people are going to want their voice heard this year. Yeah. And in Ohio, there's a very important Senate race, and Sherrod Brown, who's the incumbent Democrat, I think will have strong support, and people who otherwise might sit on the sidelines or vote for the other party will support Sherrod Brown, and it's going to be a very, very interesting year, Tavis. And you've watched this. You know the Midwest. You went to college in Indiana. You got a little Hoosier in you, not much.
No, I got a lot of Hoosier in me. Trust me, I got a whole lot of Hoosier in me. I'm just tickled that I'm talking to the former governor of Ohio. I'm talking to the former ambassador to India. I'm talking to the former Peace Corps director. Say nothing about the other stuff in his career. Graduated top of his class from Yale. Went on to become a Rhodes Scholar. I'm just delighted to be in dialogue with him. And he is so well prepared for this conversation. He knows where I went to college. He knows that I work for Tom Bradley. So it's impressive. I find myself oftentimes counseling my friend's governor because I've done this for so long. People always come to me to ask me how to be a better guest. How can they be better when they're being interviewed? And so I talk to friends and others who I try to offer advice to. And it always helps to know more about your host. And so you've done your homework, and you know me as well as I know you. And that, I find that fascinating, but I am humbled by that. I thank you for this time. Let me just close by saying not just thank you for this conversation, but thank you for being in that mercy frame when you were the governor of Ohio and commuting those death row inmates and understanding what so many of those black and brown women had gone through. Nobody justifies the killing of another, but when they're being abused in that way, you were in a mercy frame, and that's a big deal. His book is called.
That's a whole other story.
I know it is. I know it is. Speaking of a whole other story, his book is called "In the Heart of It All: An Unvarnished Account of My Life in Public Service." Governor Dick Celeste, good to have you on this program, sir. All the best to you. Thank you for your time.
It's great to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Love that guy. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Iran is denying any involvement in the attack on a U.S. outpost in Jordan that killed 3 American service members. An Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman told state media the various groups backed by Tehran in the Middle East do not take direct orders from Iran. Officials claim Tehran had no link or connection to the attack on the facility near Jordan's border with Syria. A trial date has been set for a lawsuit filed by the family of African-American Tyree Nichols against the city of Memphis, Tennessee. Robon Wells, Nichols' mother, filed a $550 million civil lawsuit after her son was beaten by Memphis police officers and died. A trial is now scheduled for January 27th of 2025. Wells is being represented by African-American attorney Ben Crump. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Staples Print Big Sale means the more you print, the more you save. Get $20 off your print purchase of $100 or more, $50 off your print purchase of $200 or more, and $100 off your print purchase of $300 or more. Ends 2/10/24. See staples.com/print for details. Print more, save more at Staples.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Both of LA's NBA teams are on the road today. The Lakers are at Houston. The Lakers are over 500 for the first time since December 30th. 5 p.m. tip-off in Houston. The Clippers are in Cleveland. Game 3 of a 7-game Eastern road trip. The Clippers have won 5 straight. They are just 1 game behind Oklahoma City and Minnesota for the best record in the Western Conference. 4 p.m. tip-off in Cleveland. The Kansas City Chiefs are in the Super Bowl for the 2nd straight year. They beat Baltimore to win the AFC title. The Chiefs will play the 49ers in the Super Bowl February 11th in Las Vegas. The 49ers held on for a 3-point win over Detroit to claim the NFC title. Students and alumni at Florida A&M finally have a new head football coach after a month-long search. Assistant coach James Cozy was promoted to take over the HBCU program. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. Let's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA, a national nonprofit, offers more than 1,000 free online resources for youth and high school sports coaches, parents, students, and administrators. Visit PCADevZone.org.
Don't settle for bumps, ingrowns, and itch due to dry skin. Venus for Pubic Hair and Skin is here with the only razor and regimen specifically designed for your pubic area, featuring a razor with the patented irritation defense bar and skincare regimen that is dermatologist and gynecologist tested. Venus helps protect your pubic skin from shave irritation. Visit GilletteVenus.com to learn more about our full regimen of products.
Your floors can go from clean to dirty fast. From juice spills, whoops, to muddy paw prints, to little sticky finger marks. Good thing your Swiffer Wet Jet works fast too. Swiffer Wet Jet easily cleans everyday messes as quick as they happen. The next mess is right around the corner. So grab your Swiffer Wet Jet and just spray, push, all clean.
You know that Big Bargain detergent jug is 80% water, right?
80% water? I thought I was getting a better deal because it's so big.
If you want a better clean, Tide Pods are only 12% water. The rest is pure, concentrated cleaning ingredients.
Ooh, pass me the intercom thingy.
Attention shoppers. If you want a real deal, try Tide Pods.
Don't pay for water. Pay for clean. If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide Pods.
Water content based on the leading bargain liquid detergent.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
I knew God was with me. I always used to pray. My prayer was I asked God not to let the devil kill me out here while I was in the streets before I could get back. But I said, if you give me one more chance at life and music, I promise you, I'm going to shout you out and I'm going to testify and we're going to have a little church up in there.
Waking up, thanking God. Every day is feeling just like Sunday. Wifey fly by my side. Green light, everything is going my way. Riding clean, living dreams. Just left the barber and I'm feeling like Midas. Heard him say, give him praise. What's in the water got you acting like this? Ain't a day go by that I don't try me how I'm doing, I'm blessed. Yes, living every moment, no regrets. Smile up on my face, I'm like, oh, yes, I'm blessed. Yes, I'm blessed.
I hate to step on Charlie Wilson. He sounds so good, and I love that track. That's an amazing song. When you think about Charlie, you think of all the hits that Charlie had with the Gap Band. And then I was thinking last night on the eve of his star today on the Walk of Fame, Hollywood Walk of Fame, think about all the solo hits that Charlie's had. It's rare to have that many hits in a group and then step out and have just as many hits solo, and he's still going strong. And I love the lyrics to that song. If you know anything about Charlie's history, most of you do. Charlie had a drug problem for many years, and he is blessed to still be alive, blessed to still have his voice. I mean, everything to the highest register of his voice. Charlie still has it. He has been blessed beyond measure, and he's blessed today to receive his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Congratulations once again to Charlie Wilson. So we're weaving in some Charlie music here and there as we celebrate Charlie Wilson today, getting his star finally on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. What a great conversation with former Governor Dick Celeste of Ohio about what he did as governor to commute death row inmates' sentences. We'll talk more about that, given all the big news of the last few days about Kenneth Smith put to death in Alabama. But with nitrogen gas, we suffocated this brother to death. What is happening in America? Now, though, a conversation about the ways in which these massive media layoffs are disproportionately affecting journalists of color. And it's not just the Los Angeles Times, although it pains me to see what's going on there, of course. But you know the old adage, last hired, first fired. People of color, that is. We'll talk now about it with Hannah Tavis, writer and editor currently working for the Neiman Journalism Lab at Harvard University. Hannah, good to have you on the program. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Tavis.
It's good to have you on this program. Let me start with a couple of broad questions, and we'll narrow as we move through the time that we do have here. These layoffs, this downsizing, pink slipping, whatever you want to call it. I love all these terms they come up with to make it sound less offensive. There's always new terminology, but by any other definition or term, you just got fired. And we're seeing a lot of this happening in news all across the country. And it is obviously having a significant impact, specifically on journalists of color. That's the broad frame that we're in. Tell me more, and I'll jump from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the most that we know right now is what's happening at the Los Angeles Times. Last week, the Los Angeles Times sent layoff notices to 115 staffers. 94 of those staffers are a part of the union, which means that, or like the Los Angeles Times Guild, which means that based on their contracts, they actually have 30 days from last week's notice period for the Guild to sort of negotiate and figure out how they can save jobs with the company. And so those people have gotten layoff notices. The final number we will know in about 3 weeks or so. And then, so of those 94 Guild members that were laid off, about, or at least 63 were journalists of color. Those are numbers that the Guild provided me, and that's based on the LA Times Guild has different caucuses.
Yeah.
So they have the LA Times Guild Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, Asian American Pacific Islander Caucus, and then the Manasa Caucus, which is North African, Middle Eastern, and South Asian Caucus, right?
Yeah.
And so, even those numbers, are not 100%. We don't know that they're 100% accurate because race is self-reported. Membership to those caucuses is not mandatory. And so you could be a person of color who has been laid off and not a member of the caucus within the Guild, right? But we know it's about at least 63 people.
Yeah. As I mentioned, this is not just happening in the LA Times. All these outlets are laying people off. Not all of them, but certainly too many of them are.
Sure.
And I am struck by, I wanted to have you on this program, I am struck by the ways in which, not surprised, but struck by the ways in which people of color are being impacted disproportionately by these layoffs. For those who don't understand why that is, maybe you can give us some insight into that. And I understand, having been in management, I'm in management now for that matter, but I understand when it comes to making decisions like these, they're not easy, they're tough decisions, and one has to figure out where you're going to make the layoffs, where you're going to make the cuts. But it is abundantly clear that, that many of these institutions, including the LA Times, are laying off people of color. Tell me more.
So the thing is that, like, we know about these specific numbers at the LA Times, and that's sort of an anomaly. We don't typically know how many people of color get laid off when there are these media layoffs. So, like, Business Insider laid off some staff last week. The music magazine Pitchfork is being folded into GQ. There's all sorts of examples, but these are often self-reported numbers. It's just sort of something that we see online in our communities of journalists of color, things like that, where we hear about it. But because there's not a lot of transparency about, companies are not going to tell you that they laid off however many number of journalists of color, but we also don't know how many journalists of color work in newsrooms. Lots of newsrooms will publish diversity reports every year, but sometimes it's not every year. And sometimes, like, the numbers change, and it's not sort of a requirement in any way, right? It's just like a good practice. And so it's hard to, it's like something that we know as journalists of color is something that happens, but it's actually really hard to measure, and we're never better off for it as a society.
Yeah.
And so, we just talked about the LA Times, but also Univision, one of the largest Spanish language news outlets and media companies in the U.S., also had layoffs in the last couple of weeks. They laid off 200 people. And that's probably across TV, radio, digital, things like that, right? And that's just a problem.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to talk about why is it happening to people of color, because we don't actually know how many people of color it's happening to because of the lack of transparency. But what we do know is that our communities and our industry is never better off for it.
Yep, that part, as they say, that part. We're never better off for these layoffs. When we come forward, there are two things I want to get your take on. We may not know all the numbers because they're not going to be transparent and reported. You found out the detail about LA because of the Guild, as you mentioned earlier. So this is a bit of an anomaly that we know exactly the number of people of color laid off in Los Angeles at the LA Times. But what is the impact of these layoffs? To your point, we know we're not better off. But I'm raising this in part because it's taken so long to get journalists of color routinely in positions where they can do the kind of reporting that needs to be done, so that we, people of color, can be seen in our full light. That we can see stories that are written and have texture to them, and that stories that are layered. That's important. We've had to fight this long just to be covered in the news media in ways that are legitimate. And now, because of all these layoffs in this industry, we're losing so many journalists of color. What is the long-term impact of people of color not being able to write about people of color? We'll put that question to Hannah Tavis when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on! What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Jim Gaffigan here with some more Straight Talk. Let's take a moment to appreciate our sweet children, loving grandparents, and eternal soulmates. Now let's use them to save money on wireless. Because with the Straight Talk Silver Plan, you get 4 lines for just $25 a month with unlimited data and no contracts. So add those human pawns, loved ones, and save money. Thanks, kids. They're finally worth it. Straight Talk Wireless, available at Walmart.
Get 4 lines on Silver Unlimited for $25 per line per month, plus taxes and fees. For data management practices and additional terms, visit straighttalk.com.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, As the only Black Talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black History. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Hannah Tamiz talking about these layoffs in the news media, in this industry. Layoffs everywhere, here, there, and everywhere. And certainly we are seeing a significant number of people of color being laid off at these various places. The question, Hannah, is what is the impact of people of color not being allowed to write about people of color?
So the thing we have to talk about is there's two things, right? Like, one, when we don't have journalists in communities, there's so many different ways that communities get worse and suffer because of the lack of journalism and accountability in their areas. And so the Democracy Fund collected a bunch of data about this, and they found that regions that don't have journalists experience drops in civic engagement. Voter turnout is often less. Businesses in certain regions are less likely to be held accountable for misconduct. All kinds of stuff, right? And you and I both know when those things happen, who is the most impacted, right? It's always people of color. It's always people from marginalized communities. And so when you don't have journalists of color and journalists from marginalized communities writing about their communities or publishing about their communities, or journalists who are writing about these marginalized communities in an accurate and empathetic way, the image that news consumers have of those communities also becomes skewed, right? If you only see Black people or Hispanic people or Asian people presented in a certain way in your news coverage and your news consumption, you're going to internalize that, right? And that's a problem because then you don't get to experience the richness of your community and the society that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
And also journalism, we say in journalism that news and journalism is the first draft of history. If the first draft of history that gets published is inaccurate coverage of these communities, when people look back in 50, 100 years, right? What are they really learning? What are they getting about? What are they what does that say about the history of the place that they're researching, that they're living in, whatever?
Yeah.
And so that becomes a problem too, because the way that certain people are portrayed doesn't just impact us today, but it impacts our generations to come.
Yeah. I wonder, I'll raise this when we come forward and give you a chance to respond to it, but we have been talking on this program, and not just here, but everywhere you look, there are conversations about DE&I being under attack, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We just had a conversation with Mark Morial, head of the Urban League. He raised this issue on this program the other day. Others raise it routinely on this program. We see it. All these promises, all these commitments that were made by major corporations after the murder of George Floyd, most of them lied. Most of them didn't do what they said they were going to do. And now, in this moment, there's major retreat on DE&I from those persons who made those commitments. Say nothing of the right-wing attacks on DE&I. That play themselves out in a variety of ways, from kicking out the president of Harvard on down the line. All kinds of examples of the ways in which the right now is attacking affirmative action, which they got rid of at the Supreme Court level, and now corrective programs like DE&I. I raise that for the following reason. When we come forward, I want to ask Hannah Tavis about this. How do we have any data that suggests to us that we know anything about how these decisions are being made? It's one thing to say, if you got seniority, you keep your job. But how do you balance, for example, seniority with diversity in your newsroom, or balance diversity with anything else that's important to you about how you run a newsroom? Is diversity a part of the equation, part of the consideration when you're laying all these people off? It sounds like not so much, but we'll take her temperature on that when we come forward in our remaining moments with Hannah Tavis on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chucha's opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chucha's Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Jackson Hewitt has a plan to get your tax refund fast with a buck here, buck there. Here a buck, there a buck, everywhere buck.
You don't have to wait weeks for your tax refund. Get money sooner with a no-fee refund advance loan at Jackson Hewitt.
On this loan, there's a money today guarantee. E-I-E-I-DO.
Don't settle for chicken feed. Get fast bucks at Jackson Hewitt today. No-fee refund advance loans by Republic Bank offered to eligible clients. Money today guarantee if approved for a loan on a prepaid card. Details at jacksonhewitt.com.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Now, Tavis is a staff writer for the Neiman Journalism Lab at Harvard University, where she covers innovation in the news media industry. So who better to go to talk about the ways in which these massive layoffs around the country, most principally and certainly of late, the LA Times, she mentioned Pitchfork being woven into GQ. All across the country, we are seeing these layoffs in mainstream media, and people of color are being impacted by that. The question is, what happens when people of color can't cover people of color? How accurate are these stories? We know the backstory to this. And so Hannah sort of addressed that question a moment ago. She made the point that when you lose journalists of color, there's evidence, clear evidence, that says that civic engagement is impacted, voter turnout is impacted, business accountability is impacted, a long list of things that we can see pretty clearly that are impacted when you lose journalists of color in newsrooms. How do you measure it? That's the question. So I want to ask her now, in the 3 minutes I have left in this conversation, about whether we know anything about how, to the extent it is true, that decisions to lay people off consider diversity in these spaces. Hannah?
The unfortunate answer is no. We don't know how these decisions get made because in the case of the LA Times, that those decisions get made between management and sometimes with the guild in their negotiations, right? Mm-hmm. But again, there's not a whole lot of transparency in the news industry about those things. We can imagine, you've worked in management, you said, you can imagine a lot of it has to do with the bottom line. A lot of it has to probably do with, there's some impact in there of metrics, what stories are people consuming, things like that. Mm-hmm. But it's unfortunate that we don't know, right? Because we don't know how those decisions are made that then disproportionately affects journalists of color. But we do see the impact of what happens when we don't have a diverse newsroom covering the diversity of a community or a society.
Yeah. Now, I wish there were, in fact, greater transparency. But I'll stick with your line because it's as real as rain, and that is we know that we are not benefited. We know that part, that we are not benefited by having fewer journalists of color in newsrooms across this country. Hannah Tavis, again, is a staff writer for the Neiman Journalism Lab at Harvard University, where she covers innovation in the news media industry. Hannah, thanks for your insights. Good to have you on. I'm glad you're there doing the work that you're doing, tracking these numbers. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much for reading. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Good to have you on this program. When we come forward in our third and final hour today, a conversation with Professor Joy James. She's professor of humanities at Williams College. Sharp sister, passionate voice, illuminating the complexities of all kinds of issues relative to prison and slavery abolition, U.S. politics, anti-black racism. She's a star. But I have asked her on this program today specifically to talk about the execution of Kenneth Smith in Alabama, and his becoming the first person in this country to ever be gassed to death, as it were, by nitrogen. It's a low point, I think, in our democracy, and we'll talk about it in our third and final hour when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Iran is denying any involvement in the attack on a U.S. outpost in Jordan that killed 3 American service members. An Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman told state media the various groups backed by Tehran in the Middle East do not take direct orders from Iran. Officials claim Tehran had no link or connection to the attack on the facility near Jordan's border with Syria. A trial date has been set for a lawsuit filed by the family of African-American Tyree Nichols against the city of Memphis, Tennessee.